Hi, I'm Lisa Redfern. This is Gingersnap, a conversation and a cookie with a creative Mainer. I'm very excited today to be here in the Lincolnville home of Michael Paul Lund. He is so many things. So I'm gonna tell you maybe 5 or 6 of the things that stand out to me. You're a vocalist, a baritone, a syndicated columnist, a writer, a songwriter, a composer. You've done voiceover. You've probably done a million things I don't know anything about. But those are the things.
I don't even remember them all, right?
Those are the things that stand out to me. I met Michael Paul Lund when he came in the Bayview Gallery, where I work a few days a week in Brunswick.
And that's a very good story, because I walked in, and there you were. You were taking over that afternoon at the gallery for the other woman who normally is there. And one thing led to another, and very serendipitously, music came up. Can you believe it?
Well, he walked in and I thought, this is an interesting guy. I can just tell this is an interesting guy.
And then you showed me your new CD, which is all about the American Songbook. And I'm looking at the songs on the CD, and one of the songs was called My Romance, a lovely, lovely song. Yeah. And I looked at you and I said, oh, that's a wonderful song. I'm sure you did the verse. And Lisa said, oh, no. That song doesn't have a verse. And I said, but it does. And then I sang it. And then you said, oh, Michael.
Yeah. I said, wow, what a voice.
That's how it started. And one thing led to another, and people were walking into the gallery, and then we kept right on singing.
I did say hello to everyone who came in.
You did. No,
just so you know.
No.
All right, so please tell it. So fill in the blanks that I did not just fill in, because that was just a few. That was just a few of the many things.
Well, my whole life I've been involved in basically music, the arts, theater, Broadway. I've done so many things, but I suppose I don't have to go back to where I was originally. I was born in England, but I came to America with my British parents when I was a young lad, and I was enrolled in a private school in Ridgewood, New Jersey, which stressed the arts, theater, music, the arts. And the principal of that school and I became very, very good friends. Her name was Louise Fornashon Carr, and she was a descendant of Harriet Beecher Stowe, which is quite a story in itself.
Yeah.
And anyway, she got me interested very early in life in Shakespeare, in William Blake, and especially William Wordsworth, my favorite poet. And I began to really had a great interest that started in the world of words and lyrics and beautiful poetry, nature, the outdoors, stuff like that. And then a few years later, I met someone who brought to my house a copy of Verdi's opera Rigoletto. And the tenor on it was a man named Giuseppe Di Stefano, who was nicknamed Pippo, or Voce d'Italia, which means the voice of Italy. And I loved his voice. I loved the way he sounded. I loved his pianissimos, his great passion whenever he sang anything. I'm a passionate person, too. Maybe it's obvious already. Anyway, so I said to my father, Dad, I really want to take voice lessons. Oh, no. He said, Father was a very practical guy. He says, no, voices, no, do something else. Be a doctor, be a lawyer, anything. Don't go into show business. You wind up being a pauper.
That's a common.
Of course. But I never backed off, and finally I was allowed to audition for this teacher in New York, who was a part of the original New York Light Opera Guild. And I had to go and sing for her and see if she would accept me as a student, and she was very strict, but she did, and I studied with her for about 10 years, and I became one of her more successful students, I put it that way. And then by the time I was 18 or 19, I was already singing here and there. I was doing Broadway shows like The Boyfriend, the lead part I did in that, and different things.
Wow.
But then I heard this tenor named Giuseppe Di Stefano, and I thought I really want to try for classical music. So I did, and it was probably I was probably then about 20 or 21. The Vietnam War was at its height. And I had just been accepted to the Amato Opera Company in New York to sing, of all things, Monterone in Rigoletto at Town Hall in New York.
Wow.
And I was really excited, took it to my teacher. Oh, man, I'm going to sing this. It's a small part, but it's a juicy part, if you know Rigoletto. And and I was to sing that at Carnegie Hall that particular February of that year, and that's about the time I got my draft notice. I said, "Oh no, I can't go. I can't go into the service. I've got to sing Monteroni and Rigoletto at Town Hall. We don't give a damn what you want to do. You have to, you know." So anyway, very quickly, I did not want to go into the Army, so I tried to get into the Air Force, the Coast Guard, anything but the Army. You know, then you're going to be a grunt in the front row with a bayonet in the UM1.
Right.
So I finally got into the United States Navy, and I signed up for 6 years, 4 years active, and 2 years in reserves. But even then, there was a light around me, if all you know what I mean by that. A light was around me, and I felt that it would be okay. I'd get through it. And then I entered the Navy Talent Contest, and I won first place. And that set me singing Old Man River, by the way. And that got me to sing at military bases, aboard ships, different places. Wow. And so I did recitals in the Navy when I was stationed in Florida. And one thing led to another. So to get that part of it over, then I got out of the service, and all I wanted to do was to sing, get back to studying again, and I did. And I was looking for work in New York. I would do anything. I sang church work on the weekends. Just to make some extra. I loved it anyway. I did oratorio. I did different things. But then I got my accompanist in New York said to me, "Michael, I think it'd be a good idea. I'm doing a cattle call in New York." And a cattle call, for those that don't know what it means everybody shows up. So they needed a baritone because the lead baritone in this Russian choir had died. And the tour was going to leave it like in less than 10 days, and they had to get somebody quick. So thus, a cattle call. So I went to the cattle call, but my accompanist was playing for it. He said, "You come, and I'll make you sound really good, Michael. You know?" I said, "Okay." I said, what am I auditioning for again? I don't know. So I'll go. I have nothing else to do, so I'll go. I went to the audition, and I sang, and I must have sung pretty well. So then the director was there of the Don Cossack Choir, very, very famous choir. They sang for presidents, kings and queens. Anyway, he didn't speak any English, only spoke Russian. But his assistant, like his coordinator, was there, and he said, "Come over here." So I went over there, and he said he'll give you the job. He told me what it paid. It was more than I ever expected. And he said, "But we leave in 8 days." I said, "Well, I don't know any of the repertoire." "Oh, don't worry. You'll learn on the bus." So get this. So I go in, and I get on the bus, and the bus came to the it's the YMCA, somewhere in the 20s in Manhattan. I got on the bus, and I sat down, and this guy, he hands me this piece of paper, and it's a big stack of songs, and it's all in Russian script.
Jesus.
And I said, "Well, I can't go on this tour. I don't know what this means." He said, "Don't worry. You see that man over there? He's from Siberia. He speaks Russian and English. You sit next to him, and then he will. You point to the word. He will say it, and you write it phonetically underneath that note."
Whoa!
And that's how I learned 18 songs.
Oh gosh.
Anyway,
saying
one thing led to another. I finished the tour. Then I came back. I had 4 people. A woman I sang with who was a cellist with the American Symphony in New York. She also sang. And then we had a flamenco guitarist and a pianist. And we did schools. We did libraries. But didn't make much money. And but I was always, I'll go anywhere, do anything. You know what it's like. So you always want to have your next gig. So anyway, and then I got an opportunity to get some charts written by this very famous arranger in New York City, Billy Verplank, who was the husband to Marlene Verplank, probably the biggest jingle singer in the world at the time. And we did a whole bunch of songs. We did some songs with Burt Bacharach, and we made a lot of demos for them. I did commercials, voiceover and stuff. I did lots of those. Then I got involved in my own record company, my own music company. And it grew and grew to where we had about customers in probably 20 countries all over the United States. We had Personalities like Steve Allen was a customer of mine, Rodney Kuhn was a customer of mine, Anne Murray, got her stuff. Anyway, and then I got involved in writing in 1998 in my first book. And there's been 7 volumes of it now. They're entitled Quiet Thoughts for a Noisy World. Each volume is a different number.
Would you read some for us?
Sure.
Yeah.
I'd be happy to. You'd be happy to. Am I going too fast?
No.
I'm sorry if I am.
No.
Just bop me over the head and I'll slow down. Read
it's
something.
Good.
Okay, I'll read something. I'll read you the very, very first piece from the first book.
Okay.
This is simply called You Are. And this is from the very first volume of Quiet Thoughts for a Noisy World. You are the first breath of spring, the fragrance of a rose, the smile of a baby, the bark of a dog. The blue of the sky you are, the scent of heather and clove, the purr of a kitten, the color of a rose. You are the beating of the heart, the breath in the lungs, the eyes of the lover, the hand of a friend. Here, there, and everywhere you are, forever present and nowhere absent. The gentleness of the dove, the power and the majesty of the whale. You are the pace of the runner, the soaring of the eagle, the leap of the doe, the croak of a frog. The beauty of stillness you are, the embrace of a loved one, little acts of kindness, a mountain, a stone, a valley, a fly. You are all these, and yet still more than can ever be written. But by just standing still and silent, all the universe rushes within, and without words says, the essence of all, you are.
That's beautiful.
That's the very first piece in the very first book. And I've lived in Maine now for a while, and a lot of my things in my recent books, I'll read a short one of that about Castine. Because I know you always ask people, how did you get, did you get to Maine?
I was just going to segue into, so how did you first come to Maine?
Frank Hatch. And Frank Hatch, who's dead now, and been dead for quite a while, did an album many moons ago. And I had recently been discharged from the United States Navy, and I was in this little record shop in Englewood, New Jersey. And I look up on the shelf, and I see this album that says, Songs of Old Castine, Francis Whiting Hatch. And I picked it up and looked at it. This looks interesting. I went in the Navy maybe a week, and I took it home, and I fell in love with every... Castine, as many people may know, is the most historical small seacoast town in all of Maine. Founded in 1612. Champlain, Miles Standish, British frigates, French warships, they all went to Castine. It was a famous place. They call it the city of 4 flags because 4 different countries had been there over the centuries. Anyway, I played this record. I loved this record. The songs on it, and it talked about all the various historical spots in Castine, everything about it. And I had this draw. So one day I got up, been out of the Navy for 10 days, and I said to my parents, I said, I'm going away for a few days. She said, where are you going? Oh, I'm going to Castine. What? Castine. Castine what? Castine, Maine. Well, what's there? Well, I don't know, but I'm going to find out. I'm going to find Frank Hatch and tell him how much I love his songs. Right. And so I got in the car, my little Fiat Roadster. I got in my car, and it was a long ride to New Jersey.
Yeah. That's like 7 hours up.
And I remember, you know, and I stayed I think I stayed in Camden the first night in a motel, which is still there. And the next day I drove into Camden, to Castine, this beautiful town. Oh, the beach, the parks. It's so wonderful. It's so clean, and it's off the beaten track. You go down this peninsula to get to it, and you don't just show up in Castine. You have to really want to go there. And you know it well, I'm sure.
Yeah, I do know Castine.
So I pull into town, and I pull up alongside the Castine Variety Store, which is still there on the corner. And I go inside, and there's a lady inside, Sylvia, who was the owner then. And I said, she said, "Can I help you, sir?" I said, "Yeah, I'm looking for Frank Hatch. Well, where would he be? Where does he live in town?" She said, "Frank Hatch?" She said, "He died last year." I said, "No, I said he couldn't. I got to meet him." She said, "No, you can't meet him. He died." So anyway, she said, "That's him up there." I said, "Oh, I know. I got that record." They had it posted on the wall. But regardless of all of that, my love and excitement and passion for this wonderful town, from that time on till this day, there isn't, especially this time of the year. I'm in Castine all the time, and I simply adore it. And the first night that I was in Castine, I stayed at the Pentagoet Bed and Breakfast in Castine, Maine, and and I wrote a song dedicated to Castine in that night, and this will paint a real picture of how much I love Castine. It's called Sunset Down East. Now you got to picture the town. This paints a picture for you, okay? All right. It's dusk in a sleepy little seacoast town. The streets are now quiet, except for an occasional passing car. The shops are silent, the harbor still. As the sun descends, the air becomes cool. Gulls stop swooping and squawking. It's almost bedtime for these Maine folk, and the balm of sea peace has arrived. What a pleasant place to be. People here walk, talk, and eat slower. They smile and say, "Have a nice day," just as naturally as breathing. Everything moves at a slower pace. Friends stop in the street to chat. Life doesn't appear to be so serious here. Priorities seem to be in natural order. The setting sun caresses the rooftops. Shimmering sunset rays sparkle off the water. This quaint hamlet is being put to bed, and I too must find my rest. Tomorrow I shall rise and sing, pack my bags and prepare to depart. And a silent sadness fills my breast, for I do so love being here. But parting requires a reuniting. So on another fine summer day, I shall appear again on the dock of this secluded harbor town called Castine.
Lovely. Do they have that like in a plaque somewhere in Castine? They ought to.
Well, I was invited years later to do a benefit in Castine for, I think it's the Congregational Church. It's on the village green there, that church, what big white church. And I sang a little bit from the podium there, read some pieces from my books. When I went to sign some books afterwards, everybody, I read a lot of pieces, but the piece that everybody wanted was that one.
Yeah, right. Well, speaking of books, are there books, I always ask everyone, are there books in your life that you've recommended many times, or that you reread, or just like the seminal books for you in your life? Even one that sort of
Well, there's quite a few, but a book that I love very much that changed my life a lot is called Wake Up and Roar. And it's written by H.W.L. Punja. And he's from Lucknow.
Great face.
Yeah, and yes, and a wonderful light. I mean, the ways of peace and tranquility and silence and nature and all that invokes to me is the most important thing in my life, and that is being able to go to a place where you can be totally open and empty, and allow something much greater than yourself to take over, and to literally. I know when I used to sing all the time, when I get on the stage, I would say, "Open my mouth so it shall be filled." Same idea. Something beyond a human personality, which really isn't. There's so much more than a human person. All my books are basically reflect that. Thus the title, Quiet Thoughts for a Noisy World. This happens to be a Japanese English edition, but.
And speaking of the power of music,
are
there albums? A similar question about the books, but are there albums or songs that you have been a touchstone for you, or a leitmotif that that sort of
Well,
come back to
this
it
may
again
be
and again?
this may be a little surprise you a little bit, but February in the United States is
There you go.
February in the United States is Black History Month,
Mm-hmm.
and the man that I've lectured on in a number of states is a man named Paul Robeson, who was the first successful Black American in this country prior to 1950. He was an actor, he was a singer, he was a writer. He spoke 6 or 7 languages fluently, and he sang in 12. He was a Shakespearean actor. But most of all, what he taught me, because his father was an emancipated slave who became a minister in Princeton, New Jersey.
Wow.
And Paul Robeson's father was probably the biggest influence in his life. And when you realized, when Paul Robeson graduated from Columbia University as a black man in 1925, he was only the 3rd Black American in history to do that with a law degree. Anyway, but it was hard even then for him to practice law, even in New York, because of his color, which is terrible, but that's the way it was. But his father said to him, "Remember, Paul, no matter what happens to you, always give back love." And he said, "Remember also that a soul has no color." A soul has no color.
Yeah.
That really affected me. And one day I was in Manhattan, and I went into a record store. This is probably, I was probably 18 or 19 years old. And I was in the classical section, and I heard this beautiful, mellifluous voice, this wonderful color and tone. And I believe Paul was singing Deep River. You know that, don't you, Deep River?
Sing a little bit.
Deep river, my home is over Jordan. Deep river, I want to cross over into campground.
Listen to that. That resonance.
So anyway, I ran up to the clerk and I said, "Oh, excuse me." He said, "What are you playing there? What is it?" And he said, "Oh," and he handed me this little 10-inch LP. And it was called The Golden Voice of Paul Robeson.
Wow.
And he did Deep River. He did Solitude of Duke Ellington. He did Songs My Mother taught me. And he did so many.
Yeah.
And then all I wanted to do was to learn more about him. I bought everything I could by him. I read books about him, biographies about him.
And now you speak. You give talks about
I
him.
do a 90-minute lecture on Robeson from birth until death. And I have him doing Shakespeare in it, monologue from Othello. I have him doing William Blake. I have him singing in 3 or 4 languages, including Russian and Chinese. And it is truly people. When I did it in Brunswick, maybe 10 years ago, about 200 people came.
Wow.
People were crying. It's so he's such a wonderful man, very misunderstood. I understand that, folks. But you come to my lecture, you won't be misunderstood anymore. You'll understand.
So that's sort of a segue into my one of my favorite questions, which is, if a movie was made about your life,
oh boy, yeah,
what genre would it be, and who would star as you, or who would you like to have star as you?
Well, if a movie was made about my life, I wanted the fact that when I first began to study classical music, it so enriched my soul, my inner life, and it because of that, whether it was Verdi, Puccini, Jules Massenet that I love, Frederick Delius, my favorite composer from Britain of all time. I actually did a sojourn to England. I went to his gravesite and I sang there. So anyway, music, really great music is of the soul. And if you really feel it in your soul, when you sing, you're not just singing words. You forget about who you are. Forget about, in this case, Michael Lund. He's nobody anyway. Just remember your message that you're singing. And so that led to looking deeper into spiritual things, to researching that. And together, great music and music of all kinds can be great. Whether it's classical, whether it's the American songbook. I mean, I've been an authority on that for the last 30 years.
Right.
I write about it. I write liner notes for compact discs, for reissues, stuff like that.
I forgot to mention that.
And I lecture about it. I've lectured about Tony Bennett, Frank Sinatra, Fred Astaire, Peggy Lee, Ella Fitzgerald, you know, all those people. I mean, I love them all because they all were gifted to be able to not just sing words, but to convey a message about what they were singing about. That's why people call Sinatra, you know, one of the greatest of all time. Why? Because he took the American songbook and he brought it to life.
For people who hadn't been as familiar with it particularly.
And so many singers today, you know, Peggy Lee is the same way. She was she wasn't just a great singer, she was also a great human being. And I think in order to be a great artist of any kind, a painter, a lecturer, a poet, a singer, whatever, you've got to be a great human being. You have to have in your heart a lot of love, to want to share with other people, to want to be able to really be a light. You know, and if you're light, what's the old saying from the Bible? Don't hide your gifts
under a bushel.
There you go.
Right.
Let your light, famous spiritual, this little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine all through the day, all through the night. Let your light shine. And then one of my many years ago spiritual teachers said to me once, she said, Michael, like the bees, she said, make your nectar, make your hive, make it beautiful, and all the bees will come to you.
Oh, that's beautiful.
You know? So I think it's just a matter, oh, look at this.
Speaking of sweet things.
Wow, whoa. Did you make that?
Look how big that is. Okay, wow, I'm just going to eat a little teeny.
Where did that come from?
So these are actually from the bakery at French and Brawn. Here.
In Camden?
Yeah, they're the big. This is a molasses cookie. As you may know, Gingersnap.
I wrote a story about French and Brawn.
You did?
I did.
Oh, I love French and Brawn. I'm glad it's still there. I mean, there have been many changes. I lived in Camden 4 times, and there have been many changes, but French and Brawn.
I got an interview on a cookie. You can't beat that, can you? Wow.
Right. Cheers.
Cheers. Up till lips, over the gums. Look out, stomach, here it comes.
Okay, so, Michael Paul Lund, if people want to reach you, because you're such a treasure trove of all kinds of things, if someone wanted to reach out to you, if they want to hear your music, if they want to get your books, all that stuff, what is the best way for them to reach you?
Well, if you want to know about my lecture schedule, I've done probably about 20 different lectures over the last 20 years on everything from opera to jazz to classical. In fact, there's a very famous Metropolitan Opera singer who retired from the Metropolitan Opera after a long career. Her name was Bidou Sayal.
Wow.
Sang at the Met, La Scala, Covent Garden, all over the world. When she retired to Lincolnville, Maine.
What?
Used to have a sign on Route 1 right near her house on the ocean to say, Casa Bidou.
Oh, that's what that is?
You remember that song?
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
I had no idea what that was.
Casa Bidou. Yeah, and she lived there for the last 30 years of her life. Sadly, and this is so funny. This will really knock you out. I think it was, come on, Michael, get with it. What year was it? It must have been sometime in the 1980s. I think it was 1985. Okay. I was the president of the Jules Massenet Society, Massenet being a very famous French composer, and I founded a society devoted to his music in the United States. We did lectures. We invited people to come perform, and I got asked to do a lecture sponsored by the Alliance Française in New York at this beautiful hall that they had. And it was myself as the president of the society and the archivist who wrote 2 books on Massenet, which we published. And so it was a sold-out event, a lot of people there, and in a beautiful place. And who's sitting in the first row but Bidou Sayal? I didn't know who she was at the time. I mean, I knew who she was, but I never met her before.
Yeah.
And so she was sitting in the front row, and next to Bidou Sayal was the archivist of the Metropolitan Opera, and I think next to him was a gentleman from Angel Records. It was quite a night. A lot of famous people there. Anyway, this is long before I ever thought I'd ever come to Maine to live. You know? I've been here now, a dozen years or more. Anyway, so after it was all over, I remember going up to her, and she had this beautiful lyric soprano voice, famous Mimi, Juliet and Romeo and Juliet by Gounod. Anyway, and Menon in Massenet. We played a recording of that at the event. But I remember going up to her, and she was a tiny little thing. Maybe she might have been 5'2", but a tiny little thing. And I remember going up to her, and she was old then. And I went up to her and put out my hand, and she said, "Thank you very much, Michael, for this wonderful." And Massenet's great-granddaughter was there too. Anne Basson Massenet. It was quite an evening. Big success. But I met her there in the 1983 or 84, 85, something like that, at the Alliance Française in New York, never knowing, Lisa, I never knew that 30 years later, I'd be living in the same town where she was. That's but she died, like, I think, 1999. But I gave a lecture at the Camden, the reading room on the top floor there. I gave a lecture all about her, and a lot of people that knew her, including her caretaker, she came, and these people, and anyway, life is a circle.
So speaking of circles, thank you so much for letting me come to your home and letting
Merci mille fois.
And letting people who don't know who you are know who you are.
Okay.
And so if someone wants to reach you,
if you want to reach me, reach out. Okay. If you want to reach me, I'll give you my email, but just be sure you put in there Gingersnap in the subject box, so I know that
it's not junk mail.
That's right. She said it. I didn't. So the email is M as in Michael, P as in Paul, Lund, MPLUND at Tidewater, like the ocean, you know. TIDEWATER.net. MPLUND at tidewater.net. If you want to book me for a lecture, you can get me that way, or any of my books, and there's 7 of them. So I look forward to hearing from you. Right. Okay, and I want to thank Lisa for her kindness in coming here to talk to little old me. She's a star too, you know.
Oh, stop! So,
and a very good singer. We haven't sung yet, but maybe one day.
You. So my little song that I do when I end goes. This has been Gingersnap. You want to sing that with me?
This has been Gingersnap.